What's up, Coaster Demons? Today I will be ranking all the roller coasters at Six Flags New England. I just went back here this year. Last time I went was 2019. And my rankings for the coasters here have definitely changed a lot. Like, most of it is the same. However, the top 5 is definitely different now. But overall, I find Six Flags New England actually a very underrated Six Flags park with a very underrated top 5. And yeah, I think it's time we get into the countdown, so let's go. Number 11 is Great Chase. This is your typical E&F Mile kiddie coaster. And since this is a kiddie coaster, it's obvious we're going to come in last place. Number 10 is Flashback. I hate this ride. It is a terrible Vekoma boomerang. It's rough, it's shaky, it's a headbanging machine. It's just an awful ride. It's also forceless, and it's definitely the most boring boomerang I've ridden. Also, this is the only coaster I've ever ridden that's made me nauseous when I got off. Like, this thing, it's just horrible. It was horrible in 2019, and it was horrible this year. It didn't make me nauseous this year, but it did in 2019. However, this year it was just as rough as it was in 2019. It had as much headbanging as it did in 2019. This is just overall a terrible coaster. Number 9 is Gotham City Gauntlet. This is another coaster I hate. This is a terrible Wild Mouse coaster. It's rough, it's uncomfortable, the transitions are just bad. Mauer Wild Mouses suck, honestly. It's definitely not worse than the one at Dorney Park. Dorney Park by far has the worst Wild Mouse coaster I've ever ridden. But this ride still absolutely sucks. It's boring, it does really nothing. It's just a typical Wild Mouse, but it does nothing really. It has no airtime. The turns are just, they're abrupt, yeah, like most Wild Mouses, but they're really uncomfortable on this one. This is just an awful Wild Mouse coaster, and it's just bad. It's not as bad as Wild Mouse at Dorney Park, but it's still a terrible coaster. Number 8 is Catwoman's Whip. This is just like Harley Quinn Crazy Train, and as you all know, I am not a big fan of Harley Quinn Crazy Train at all. In fact, I really don't like that ride. Catwoman's Whip is definitely better than Harley Quinn Crazy Train. However, it's still a really boring coaster that does absolutely nothing. And you could just basically take a nap on it. It's just so boring. Number 7 is Pandemonium. Now, this is a fun spinning coaster. It actually has one really good pop of airtime after the drop off the mid-course. There's this little bunny hop, and that actually gives some really good airtime. Also, this ride spins a lot more than most other spinning coasters I've ridden. I would take this over the Zamperoa spinning coasters any day. This ride, it's a good family coaster. I mean, I don't find it that interesting. It's just kind of there. But this is still a pretty fun coaster, more meant for families, but I still enjoyed it. But it's nothing special at all. Number 6 is the Joker. Now, this just feels like your typical SNS 4D free spin. It basically runs like the one at Great Adventure, so they basically feel identical. Overall, this is a fun ride, but it's an SNS 4D free spin, which I kind of find these rides kind of mid. But they're still fun rides, and that's why Joker is coming in at number 6. And now we're in the top 5, and this park may have one of the most underrated top 5s out of any park. Number 5 is Thunderbolt. This is a really fun wooden coaster with some very good moments of airtime, actually. It focuses more on floater airtime, in my opinion. It has some good floater airtime, but it has 2 really strong ejector pops. It has this hill before the end that gives great ejector, and then it has this sharp ejector hill in the middle of the ride. The ride is rough on the valleys only. I found other than the valleys, the ride to be decently smooth. But this ride, it definitely feels like your classic wooden coaster. This is just a very fun wooden coaster with some good airtime moments. The layout's actually pretty solid too. But I definitely like this a lot more than I did in 2019. And yeah, Thunderbolt is a good ride. Number 4 is Riddler's Revenge. This is by far the biggest surprise of any coaster I've actually ridden this year. I was not expecting to like this thing at all when I rewrote it. I hated it in 2019. However, when I rewrote it this year, it was awesome, actually. It was really intense. It was snappy and whippy. The ride is forceful. The inversions are actually really good. The ride is pretty rough, but Honestly, this thing is just really good. The roughness wasn't even that bad this time, and the restraints weren't bad at all either this time. This is actually a really good ride in my opinion now. Very intense, the inversions are snappy, and it's just a really fun ride, and it actually showed me that some SLCs can be very underrated. This and Great Nor'easter are my favorite SLCs. I barely prefer Great Nor'easter to this, actually. But Ridder's Revenge is actually a really good ride, and I don't understand the hate for it, honestly, now. Number 3 is Batman The Dark Knight. Now, back in 2019, when I first rode this, I found the ride to be pretty boring and honestly forceless. However, this year, it totally redeemed itself. This ride's awesome. The inversions are really fun. The layout's actually pretty good. It's smooth towards the front row. In the back row, I'll admit, it is pretty rough in the back row. But in the front row, it's actually pretty smooth. Now, this is still one of the lower tier forwards for me. Like, it's definitely not the worst forwards for me at all. In fact, it destroys Firebird, which is the worst forwards I've done. Batman The Dark Knight is a really, really fun B&M. It's smooth, and honestly, it's actually pretty forceful. Okay, it's smooth in the front. In the back row, it actually is kind of rough. But honestly, this is just an underrated B&M forwards. I wouldn't say it's super underrated, but it's underrated. The pacing's actually really good on it too. I used to think the pacing on it was bad. However, this year it was hauling through the layout. And overall, this is just a really fun B&M forwards coaster that I find very underrated. And now we're in the top 2, and both for these coasters in the top 2 are in my top 15 overall. Number 2 is Superman The Ride. This is an incredible intimate hypercoaster. Now, I used to think this ride was pretty overrated. However, I don't think that at all anymore. This thing is freaking incredible. The airtime on every hill is so strong, no matter what type of airtime you're getting. There's ejector, there's flowjector, there's floater. There's all sorts of airtime on this thing. It pulls some good forces at some moment. This is a perfect coaster. Now, I do find this ride to be kind of rattly. However, that doesn't take away from any of it. The airtime is just so strong on every airtime moment. Like, this thing is just amazing. The spaghetti bowl section is awesome. The best part of the ride is the It Happens hill, which is that second hill before it goes over like the exit and into the spaghetti bowl section. That hill gives insane ejector airtime, and it's one of the best airtime moments in my opinion. The restraints on it are kind of bad because you can get stapled with them and it will prevent some of the airtime, but you can feel the airtime strength still even when you're stapled. That's how strong the airtime is on this thing. The pacing on it is extremely underrated too. I actually found the pacing to be really good on it. This is just overall an absolutely amazing coaster. There are no flaws with it, in my opinion. And that's why it's coming in at number 2. Now, what could be number 1 then? Well, number 1 is Wicked Cyclone. This ride is incredible. The airtime on every hill is so strong. The ride is actually decently forceful. The inversions give great hang time, and some of them are even whippy. There's this one airtime moment under that first turnaround that's one of the strongest airtime moments, in my opinion, of all time, probably, out of coasters I've ridden at least. It's coming up right here, actually. This airtime moment right underneath this turnaround is insane. The airtime is just amazing on this ride. I don't know how people say this thing doesn't have airtime or that it's a weaker RMC. This, in my opinion, is a top-tier RMC. This ride is incredible. Every single element on this ride is great. The layout for it is fantastic. And the pacing on it is actually really good. I find that very underrated. I just find this to be a very underrated ride. It's actually, this is just an incredible coaster. I don't know how people say this ride is weak. It is not weak at all. Every moment on this ride is amazing. And I had to put it at number 1 in the park. This ride is just too good. It's just incredible. So yeah, those are my rankings of all the roller coasters at Six Flags New England. Make sure to like this video, also subscribe to the channel, and I will see you all next time. Keep coasting on my coaster demons. Peace out.